as a leader when I am thinking about those people who report to me, in order to want to really have those ongoing conversations, really want to invest in them. Yes, it helps me to think about what that does to the bottom line in terms of reducing turnover and the cost associated with that. But if I really get to a point where I genuinely care for the people that are working for me, I'm far more likely to dive into those conversations and to want to retain them and to want to create a culture where those people who I'm spending every day with really thrive.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. The end of July means it's time for our monthly wrap-up of news items related to HR. And to do that, I'm joined again by Ashley Smalley. Ashley is the founder of Smalley Consulting. She's a certified human resources professional, a trusted consultant, and an adept facilitator in the workplace culture sphere. Ashley's passion is for people to enjoy their work because they enjoy the people with whom they work. And she accomplishes this through tailored leadership and people development strategies. Welcome back to Good Morning HR, Ashley.
Oh, Mike, thanks so much for having me. It's been too long. I think it's been like a year and a half.
Yeah, it's like 102 episodes, actually. So it's been a while. You were number 60, and I think this is 158 or something. So
that's awesome.
It's crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah. You're busy. I love it.
It's good. Yeah, you've been busy too. You've been on the conference circuit. I've seen you at a lot of events. We cross paths.
I know. So I love it every time. It's always good for a laugh every time our paths cross. I may or may not learn anything, but I will always
I never
laugh.
promise you'll learn something, but if I'm happy if people just laugh.
Me too.
So it's been a busy month in news stuff for July, but a lot of it's been more related to employee engagement and all of that. So kind of it's kind of the trend of the articles we pulled. Gallup started out with this Gallup survey. They did their global survey about employee engagement, which was interesting and alarming in some respects. But what I was surprised, because I hadn't heard this fact before, is that women have higher engagement than men in the workplace, which sounds good until you get to the senior leadership level, and then they're at the same, basically 45% for women, 46% for men at senior leadership. But I guess the thing that's most alarming to me is not that women lost their gap, when they got up to senior leadership. It's that fewer than half of senior leaders are engaged. I mean, I think that's the bigger thing. And the article from Gallup that I was reading about this piece of the survey was really focused on how to get these women more engaged, which I think when you talk about how do we get the whole organization engaged, right? I mean, if half of our senior leaderships, and then everybody else was in the 30s, I mean, male or female, were down there, project managers, individual contributors were all at a lot lower level. And I know you talk to businesses and leaders about this a lot. What's your take on the survey?
Well, at first, I was trying to understand exactly what they were getting at with the article, and it kind of were they trying to tell a story, because it kind of made it sound like all of a sudden men were much more engaged, and then you look at the actual statistics, and it's like, no, it's at the senior level, it's equal. Right. But I think looking at the percentages of just how little engagement, I'm shocked. And I should know what is specifically driving that, but I really just kept looking at it going, it is really low. It is really low, alarmingly low. And what's driving that? Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to unpack inside of engagement numbers in general. And I'm not sure that our expectations of employees are right at the level. I mean, if the idea, and I think the way Gallup primarily, I should have pulled that quote, but the way Gallup defines it is that it's something along the lines of, I enjoy the work that I do, I enjoy the people I work with, and the work I do is important, those kind of things. And I think it's not unreasonable to have some percentage of to just expect that some percent of the working population is going to be, I want to come to work, do my job, go home and be with my family or my dogs or my 50 cats, whatever, and not have all those, and so, there's some percentage of it, but you can see as they go higher in what I thought was, is individual contributors, women were at 35 and men were at 30, managers 37 and 29 for men. So men actually went down when they become managers, and I can feel that pain. But then project managers but as you move up in the organization, people generally rise up in engagement, but still it's below 50% at senior leaders.
Yeah, well, and I've had jobs, and I'm sure you have too, where maybe I didn't love the work I was doing, but I took pride in the work I was doing. I was still engaged. I was still trying to give 100%. And so maybe by the definition that they use, maybe that kind of skews those numbers a little bit. But yeah, the idea that at the very highest level in an organization, we've got less than half the people who are really excited to be doing what they're doing. Maybe that reflects in the engagement number of the workforce as a whole. If you've got leaders who are just kind of phoning it in, that would make some sense to me. Then why at an individual contributor level, well, shoot, if my boss he doesn't care, then I don't care either.
And I think a lot of it boils down to leadership communication, and I know that's an area you work a lot in, but if people don't feel connected to their boss or don't think that, to their boss, they're nothing more than a means to an end to get this work done, which, if we're being completely honest, that's what the company's not here to hire people to make people feel good. But I think we as employers need to pay attention to the fact that it's really expensive to onboard and train and then exit employees on a continual basis. And it's not that expensive to make them feel heard, to give them feedback, positive feedback and constructive feedback, and to do the things that people need to do to feel like they're appreciated.
Well, one of the other articles you sent from Gallup was talking about how do we get people engaged? What are the things that they feel like they're missing out on? And it was just that. It was real conversations with their managers. It was real checkpoints. It was real-time feedback. And it doesn't cost, as a manager, as a leader, it doesn't cost me much, just my time. And of course, that is a valuable commodity. But I think about leadership as an opportunity to invest in the people that they might excel at what they are doing. And that doesn't, if you think about it, that is very cheap compared to comp and benefits. And it really just requires my effort. Now, I will tell you as a leader, when I am thinking about those people who report to me, in order to want to really have those ongoing conversations, really want to invest in them, yes, it helps me to think about what that does to the bottom line in terms of reducing turnover and the cost associated with that. But if I really get to a point where I genuinely care for the people that are working for me, I'm far more likely to dive into those conversations and to want to retain them and to want to create a culture where those people who I'm spending every day with really thrive, where it's more than just they're a cog in the wheel performing the work. Because I think, and I would have to go find somebody way smarter than me who's done way more research, but I believe that research would show that when we are satisfied, when we are excited about what we're doing, it's the Gallup definition of engagement, right? Our engagement goes up, and now we're working harder and we're doing better work.
Yeah, and that other Gallup article you mentioned said that almost half, like over 40% of employee turnover is preventable. But we don't ask the right questions. We don't have the communication. So we're not doing the things that we might do to keep somebody. 44% of those people, or 36% of the people who left never even told anyone before they made that decision. And so that's, a little over a third didn't say anything, but that means almost 2/3 did say something, and somebody in management didn't respond.
And that's really interesting to me. Most of my background in HR was in a blue collar environment out in the oil and gas industry. And really, most of the time, we would just have people show up and say, I'm done, or not show up at all. I cannot really even get my mind around, you've got 2/3 of the people leaving saying, hey, I'm not happy, I'm displeased, I'm concerned, I see no future. And we're not even willing to have a conversation then. And maybe that points back to disengaged leaders. We're not willing to, it feels very chicken and egg like this conversation that we're having is, if one is disengaged, then what is that doing to the other side of the equation?
Well, and we don't do and here comes the drinking game. Rob, our producer, and I and Ashley were joking earlier before we started that we've got the Good Morning HR drinking game. Here comes the drinking game. Get your shot glass ready. The problem is if somebody's really good at a job, so we make them a manager, but we don't give them the training, and we don't teach them how to do that, and we don't teach them that, X% of the time that you're supposed to be a people leader means you're leading people. It's not doing the job. And leading them means hearing them, making them feel, important to the organization, incentivizing them to bring their best every day, and all those things. And I think we just don't teach managers to do that.
No, and so then we lose our best producer, and we gain a not ideal manager, right? And so we lose all over the place. We ran into that all of the time. You promote your best worker, and now you've lost your best worker, and really kind of messed around with morale because of what you've put into a management role with absolutely no training, no foundation laying, and it's really a recipe for disaster. So I understand why there's a Good Morning HR drinking game around that topic. That's a good one to keep bringing up.
It comes up a lot. Yeah. And of those who said something would have helped them stay, 30%, which isn't a surprising number, said more money.
Sure.
And sometimes that's doable, sometimes it's not. But then the other 70% weren't talking about any kind of comp or benefits. They were talking about how they're connected to the organization, how the organization makes them feel valued, their daily interactions with their manager, and opportunity for advancement, things like that. Those are the kind of things that if you're doing exit interviews, you hear that on the way out, it's too late, right? Mm-hmm. And just having managers who are really trained in doing good one-to-ones and are disciplined in doing it, and are comfortable having frank conversations with their employees about their circumstances.
Well, and again, things that we should be training managers on and equipping them to be able to do, because so often people don't know how to have hard conversations. But how little does it cost us to talk to people about what their future could be, or talk to people about how to grow, or what characteristics, what traits, what skills they need to develop to be able to move to the next level in the organization. I mean, really all it's going to require is some dedicated time and intentionality towards a relational style of leadership where I am approachable, and more than that, I will come to you before there's a problem, to kind of head the problem off at the pass, to really develop in such a way that we are openly communicating about these things before you're ready to leave. And oh, by the way, when you have this fleeting thought that maybe the grass is greener on the other side, I know it before it's really become your full-blown plan of action, and maybe we can change the course of things.
Yeah, and so often I see on different conversation boards, and HR groups, where people say, I won't be friends with people at work, or managers shouldn't be friends with their subordinates. And I mean, maybe we shouldn't be out drinking with them on Friday night, but there needs to be that connection. And I don't think people feel valued when they just get a pat on the head from a manager, good job, and they walk on. I mean, people are really looking for that connection, that feeling that somebody cares about them.
I think the concern for people that hold that position is that it's going to be messy. I'm gonna know too much. I'm gonna have to work around what I know. I might have to make accommodations for things. I want to make sure that I'm being fair across the board. I mean, it comes from a good place, a good intention, but we really miss out on getting to know a full person. I don't know about you. I'm not great at only bringing work Ashley to work and leaving personal Ashley aside. If something's going on in my personal life, it seeps in whether I mean for it to or not, and vice versa. I'll take the work home I know you shouldn't, but it travels in there. It's like spaghetti, it just travels together from place to place. And so I want to be seen and valued in the organizations that I work in as a whole person. You know, I don't want there to have to be this disconnect. And in order for that to happen, I need a leader who sees me and cares about the things that are going on in my life. So my dad and I got to work together for about 9 years, and he was the COO of our organization. And like I say, very blue collar, if you've never worked in oil field culture, I don't know how to describe it, but it is like the Wild West. But what my dad was so great at was caring for you and knowing what was going on with your wife and your kids and the health of your parents and all of that, because what that did is that laid a foundation for when you forgot to show up and do your job like you were supposed to, and he had to call you in and lay it all out about what the expectations were. You knew that was coming from a place of not just, man, you screwed up and you're really messing things up for the organization, but you knew he cared for you. So when he was asking more of you, you wanted to give it. It was that relational style of leadership was so great as a foundation, and it made it possible for employees to want to do more. How hard is it to have those conversations? Not that hard.
And I think when employees have the opportunity, I mean, engagement, you know, the definition of engagement I've always liked is an employee's willingness to give their, I hate when I lose words. It's I'm having a Biden moment here. Hold on. When employees have well, we may have to edit that anyway. Nah, we'll leave it in. When employees have they give the God, what's the word? They give their extra effort beyond what the minimum that they have to do.
Okay.
And now it's going to come to me.
And I would help. I would help if I could think of I don't know where we're going.
If you could read my Coffey's
discretionary
mind,
effort.
That is it. See, my producer, Rob, has heard it so many times. Yes. Yes. When an employee gives their discretionary effort. Thank you, Rob. And everybody, meet Rob Upchurch, our technical producer. And I think it's the first time Rob's voice has actually come across the podcast. Thank you, Rob. So, but that's the definition I've always liked, is this employee, if they're really engaged, they want to give, they want to see the organization succeed. They want to be successful in their role. And you only get that if you feel connected to the job, to the company, and you want that relationship with your manager to be solid. My kids, were very bright, but could be knuckleheads at home, but they were really well behaved at school because not because they didn't want to get in trouble, but because they've always cared what adults thought of them. And they always wanted to be respectful. And so they did really well in school because they didn't want to disappoint those teachers. And they gave a rat's butt about their parents, being disappointed, but certainly they wanted their teachers. And I think that transfers to the workplace. I mean, if you've got that relationship, that trust with your employees as a leader, they're going to want to not disappoint you. Mm-hmm. And now you've got that reciprocal responsibility, right? I mean, sure. And that's a responsibility as the owner of my company, or as when we're working with even our vendors who are important to us, things like that. I've got a responsibility back to them to deliver, to live up to my promises, and to get over it when things go wrong, and life happens and gets in people's way. Mm-hmm. Finding ways to make things work so that people can take care of what's really their priority, knowing the job's still going to be here when that's done.
Sure. There was something you said that made me think about, a certain percentage of the workers are such internally driven high performers that for the most part, they're going to just show up. They are going to be engaged. They want 100% out in front all the time. They don't know how to work any other way until they consistently show up and are unappreciated for that effort. And then you start to see kind of diminishing returns on their work. And those are the ones that'll leave in a hot minute because they know they're valuable and they will be appreciated somewhere else. I watched that happen recently with a family member of mine in HR. She worked in an organization. She's a high performer. She likes to come and she likes to be engaged and she wants to be involved and she's doing all this work and it's thankless. And after several years of being never appreciated, she's like, okay. I mean, nobody's talking to her about advancement. Nobody's talking to her about the work that she's doing or the value that she's adding. Finally, she's like, I'm going to go somewhere where that will be appreciated, where that will be acknowledged, where my manager will say, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing here. And man, on a dime, you see productivity go back up in her, just the way she's talking about her work day and her willingness to put forward that discretionary effort, as you said, and kind of go back into, oh, shoot, I'm capable of 120% whenever I've got real support behind me. So.
And yeah, well, that's the other thing. This article's talking about people who voluntarily leave. And that's good if a disengaged employee leaves. It's better than the alternative of a disengaged employee staying, right? I mean, the amount of productivity and just expense to the organization from having this person on board who you're paying and who's maybe bringing down the rest of the performance of the rest of the team and all of that. But I still say, largely that's a management problem. I mean, there are people who are just that way, and they're always going to be unhappy. But hopefully you identify them in the employee selection process, and as soon as you identify them, whenever it is, you begin to move them out. Improve them, bring them up, or move them out.
Yeah, I was going to say, do what you can to rehab them. If it is a management issue, if it is where I recognize, and I think a good leader will always go, hold up, have I dropped the ball somewhere? Is there something I can do better that would bring them along? Is my communication not there? Is my communication style not where they connect? Just kind of thinking through this checklist of things and trying to take responsibility first. And then if I cannot, no matter what I do, get you to get on board, okay, then I've got to recognize the impact that your attitude is now having on the entire organization. At least I've worked in an industry where it's like, oh, you're not it, cut them loose. There's a line of people waiting. And I think that is negative for company morale as well, and just workplace culture and what that tells a story to everybody else who's around as well.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. HR leaders are often approached by other parts of the organization with a request that they run a background check on someone for a legitimate business purpose, but not an employment-related purpose. And because the laws regarding employment-related background checks are totally different from any other kind of background check, and most employment background screening companies won't even touch other kinds of checks, the HR pros think they have to say no. While for the last 25 years, Imperative has been the best source for employers who want to make well-informed hiring decisions, we also provide a variety of other due diligence background investigations. So whether your company needs to check out a potential service provider, needs help with the due diligence on an investment or acquisition, or maybe your legal department needs a litigation-related background investigation, Imperative is here to help. You can learn more at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 158 and enter the keyword Smalley. That's SMALLEY. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Ashley Smalley. And then there's the article I saw about personality hires, and I'm familiar with the concept. I hadn't heard that term.
I hadn't either.
And they were really trumpeting them like that's a really positive thing. And I think in my entire HR career, I've been telling people to move away from personality hires. This idea that, it'd be a great person to have a beer with. Let's hire him. And really, it just introduces so much kind of bias. What was your take on that article?
Well, first, I thought it was interesting because I'd never heard the term. And about halfway through the article, it was like, hire to fit or hire to culture. They had in parentheses. And that is, not parentheses, these are quotation marks, that they had in the middle of the article. And I thought, okay, now they're about to kind of tie it together. And it really didn't. They just like randomly threw the subheading in and kept going. And so that kind of threw me for a second. But my thought was, yes, of course, you want vibrant people in the organization. Yes, of course, that creates an element of energy and connection and a relational quality on the team that would otherwise maybe not be there. But certainly you would not want that at the expense of not having skills to go with that. Ideally, and I think they mentioned that in the article, like ideally it would be a full package. If I'm hiring, I can't fathom hiring somebody with, let's call it an A+ personality and no skills.
Or even B- skills. I just can't see that. I mean, if I've got better alternatives, yeah.
But if I'm hiring and I've got equal skills, then okay, let's also take the one who's got the personality who would help draw people. Because some people are just naturally galvanizers. They kind of pull people in and shake people up in a really good way. And so when that's on the table, when that's an option, yes. But the part of the article that talked about, other employees could be really resentful of that. I'm thinking, you think?
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah, and even there, I mean, I can point back to my early career, certainly, where maybe not, it wasn't a personality hire, but certainly personality helped me. I mean, I was the extrovert in the groups and eager beaver young guy who would jump in and do anything, all that, and high social connection, all of that. I could see that, but if we're looking at two applicants and you've got to be really aware of what that culture is where you're putting this person. Because if it may be somebody who you may have one applicant who's really competent and generally in positive and all of that, but not real extroverted. And then another one who's, very extroverted and outgoing, but you put them into a work group full of introverts, where people who are, nose to the grindstone and, dealing, like my employees.
Very task-driven.
Task-driven. 2 or 3 computer monitors. They're dealing with a bunch of data and needs a lot of focus. Adding this personality to the room, like me, when we were in the office, my employees hated it when I walked through the main office.
Because you were keeping them from getting stuff done. You just wanted to chat and see how things are going. They're like, Coffey, shut up. We're trying to get stuff done today. Yeah, no, and that's a good point. And I think it would make a lot of sense to pay attention to who you're hiring into which group. I feel like it would just be just silly not to. I think that's a good point.
And I think the other thing that managers have to pay attention to is when we're considering people for promotions or other recognition, am I really positive about this person because of their personality and they are the ones who've ingratiated themselves with me? And I don't mean that in a negative term. They're just that person that I again, that's the person I'd like to have a beer with on Friday night.
They're easy to like.
Yeah. And so we maybe have a bias towards those people to, think that, they're the whole deal, where if we don't have good metrics and good measurements of performance and aren't really thoughtful about it, we can overlook those employees who are really the dedicated ones who are really giving, everything every day to pull the organization forward and maybe are more technically competent.
Just a little quieter about the way that they are going about it. And it's kind of the concept of the squeaky wheel, right? Like it's so easy to give you all the attention because it's evident that you're here. Right.
Yeah. Well, and while we're talking about evidence that you're here, there was the article there's a survey from the Global Human Workplace. Why can't I talk? Global Human Workplace Index survey. It said 80% of employees feel productivity anxiety, and 1/3 of them feel that multiple times a week. And so they feel like they've got to get a lot of work done in order to demonstrate to management that they're valuable. Maybe they don't get enough feedback was a big part of it. They didn't understand how they were connected to the company. And so they don't know, am I doing enough? Why, the work's coming in, that kind of anxiety would make me crazy.
Oh, me too. One thing that I thought was really interesting is the article talked about that type of anxiety is higher in women, and the article I think was trying to make the connection that means that that women aren't receiving what they need in the workplace in order to not feel this, and that they're being slighted in some way. It just kind of had a tone to it. But I've have daughters that have dealt with anxiety, so I've done a lot of reading and things on that. And really from childhood, girls and women tend to be wired that way. We tend to we tend to run a little hotter, is what we say in our house. Just kind of is like it's all the spaghetti that we're carrying around everywhere. It's very interwoven, and so I kind of took exception a little bit to that in the article. I'm like, maybe. Also, maybe that's just what we're bringing into the organization with us. I do think it's so interesting because all of these things are so connected, all these articles that we're talking about. In the unknown, in the lack of communication, in the lack of feedback, that's when we tend to feel like, oh man, I gotta really up it right here, and I'm one of those weirdos. I really enjoy feedback from my manager. I really like to know, am I doing well and am I doing not? Now, between us, I really like to hear that I'm doing well, but I want to know if I'm not, so that I can make adjustments. And if I'm not confident in the work that I'm doing, a lack of communication from my manager will produce that feeling of anxiety. Have you ever experienced that?
Well, to be honest, I'm a highly anxious person anyway. And so once I started a therapy and I'll be the ketamine therapy to knock down my anxiety, I had to find new ways to actually be productive because I had built my whole life on using that anxiety as fuel. Mm-hmm. And so over the last few years, I've had to find other ways to push myself forward because I've just relied on that for so long. But certainly in my family, one of my sons has a pretty good dose of anxiety. He's in college still, so the real world's still a little bit out there for him. But sure. But he's learning to manage it earlier than I ever did. Mm-hmm. So that's the positive. But I think part of it is, you were talking about it highlighting it with women. And I get always nervous when we start talking about groups of people based on some demographic, because I never want managers to start treating people a certain way mm-hmm. because, she's a woman and you know how they are, or, he's a dude and, that. I think it's, we have to, one of the leadership things that managers have to really learn how to do is deal with each employee where they are.
Yes.
And that's why you've got to have all the communication stuff we talked about earlier and knowing who they are. Yes. What do I need to do as a leader? What do I need to give to this person to get the very best out of them, mm-hmm. to make this a place where they feel included, yes. where they feel that they're part of the organization, they're valued, we want them here. And, what do I need to do? What do they need in their toolkit that I'm giving them to be the best employee that they can be, which means being happy here and all of that.
Absolutely. The analogy I always use for that is coaching to your players. For anybody who's ever coached, little league sports or even at a higher level than that, you figure out what makes those players tick, and you figure out what motivation do they need to really perform at their highest level. There are those who need, a good firm talking to, and there are those who need just gentle encouragement. Of course, I'm coaching, preteen girl basketball, but there are those that need that just nearly coddling at that age, and then there are those who are like, no, you're capable, let's go. But you have to know them. I mean, really know them, because if you get that backwards and you go too hard, one of those sweet girls will just she'll fold up on you like a cheap tent. And if you've got to have that right level for each employee, and you can't do it if you haven't gotten to know them. If you take a one size fits all approach, it's dangerous. And I feel the exact same way you do. And I think maybe that's why so many of the articles, like the one about engagement at the senior level and just talking about women and what women need. And I'm like, maybe you might need to ask the woman in the senior level position in that organization what it is that's keeping her from being engaged. I think you're right. I think it's wise to just take a wide sweeping generalization of any group of people and say, this is what you need to do differently to address it, really takes the humanity and the unique qualities that each individual brings out of the picture. And that's a shame.
And it's too easy for us to fall into that trap, I guess, to say that, this group, based on whatever demographic you want to look at, needs to be treated differently. Just, that's not fair to anybody. And, talk about building resentment. You go to this high performer female employee and start talking to her like maybe some other female employees might want you to. Mm-hmm. That may be the disengagement tool. And I think it leads us to make assumptions about people that we should be training managers not to make, right? And so I think there's some challenges when we start looking at this. But we can learn, we can gain insight so that maybe if we read an article like this, now when I'm talking to a specific employee, mm-hmm. and they're demonstrating some concerns about something, maybe I understand anxiety a little better, or I understand mm-hmm. whatever's going on, or I recognize that, we're putting a lot of pressure on my team right now. This is why we're not performing at the level. We need to find a way to, release some of this steam.
Well, and so using those articles and those information pieces that we're hearing as seed planters in our mind, where we go like, okay, that gives me something to ask questions about, not make assumptions about. I think there's nothing worse than somebody who's not in a group of people making assumptions about what that group of people wants and what's going to fix things for them. Just in general, I think that's a bad approach. I think an individualized approach full of question asking is a much better tack at things like that.
And I'm skeptical when somebody in that group tells me what that group needs,
mm-hmm.
because that's always based on their own bias too, about what they individually have experienced legitimately.
Sure.
And but I don't think it's fair for me to, if somebody, if a woman tells me you've got to treat women this way because this is what they expect, that's what she wants.
Sure.
And perfect.
And she also
I'll try to do that. Yeah.
She's the self-appointed mouthpiece for all women. And it's like, maybe others had a different opinion. And I'll be honest, I'm guilty of assuming that if I feel this way, everybody else must feel this way, right? Like it's the only possible option.
Only right thinking people.
Thank you. But really keeping in mind that everybody has completely different perspectives on things. I heard a quote one time that said, where you sit determines where you stand on any given issue, where you're situated, meaning how you grew up, the things you've experienced, the things that make you uniquely you, and the things that you have gone through will determine where you stand on any given issue. And so to assume that everyone has the same perspective as I would is ignorance, because not everybody's lived the same life that I have lived, and vice versa. So we've really got, I think, leader or not, we've got to get good at asking questions instead of making assumptions.
Yeah, it goes back. Monica Guzman was on the podcast about a year ago, and her book is about having genuine, curious conversations with people who are, come from other backgrounds and who, you may disagree with, and how to have those civil conversations. And that's, part of SHRM's big push right now too, is civility in the workplace. And, I can't imagine why in July, as we roll out of July 2024, why civility is going to be a conversation topic. But
I don't get it either, because everybody just seems to get along so well anymore. So,
yeah. Well, that is all the time we have. We had a whole list of things, but we got through some of them, and I really appreciate you joining me, Ashley.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'd love to do it again.
And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And you've heard his voice now, too. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and I will take my Adderall. And until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.